Well, uh, hi. Thank you everyone for coming this program. My name is Rahmat Hidayat from SEAscreen and Rumata Art Space. SEAscreen Academy is held in Makassar. Southeast Asian Screen Academy is a film training and development program initiated by film director Riri Riza and Rumata Art Space. SEAscreen brings all filmmakers from Southeast Asia with they are already prominent or and aspiring ones in friendly, small and intimate collaboration and interactions. SEAscreen is also a film culture for Asian region, particularly for Southeast Asia. Therefore, not only film training and development, SEAscreen is also held any other sub-programs such as panel discussion, workshops, and film screening. Uh, this year, SEAscreen is the theme is a manifesto. Manifesto is a response of our pandemic situation this year. We are now with David Hanan for this program. Our program today is Open Lecture, Cultural Specificity in Indonesian Cinema. David Hanan, after teaching English and comparative literature at both the University of Melbourne and Monash University, David Hanan undertook a graduate program in film studies in the Slade School of Fine Art at University College London. On his return to Australia, he pioneered the teaching of film studies at Monash University. Being head of film there for 17 years, he has researched film in Indonesia since 1983. And this includes providing English subtitles for 10 major Indonesian film classics at the request of the Indonesian National Film Council. He was also for a time the Southeast Asia consultant for the Melbourne International Film Festival 1985 until 1997. In 2017, he published Cultural Specificity in Indonesian Film, Diversity in Unity with London-based publishers Palgrave Macmillan. It's planned that Palgrave will publish the companion volume to this first book in late 2021. The second book, entitled Moments in Indonesian Film History, 1950 until 2020, Film and Popular Culture in a Developing Society. David is also working on an update book, Film in Southeast Asia, Views from the Region, Hanoi Vietnam Film Institute and SEAPAFA, which he first edited in 2001. Here, I let David Hanan for the lecture, please.
So I begin now?
Yes.
Good afternoon. I wish to thank Rahmat and also Rumata Art Space for inviting me to do this presentation, which is broadly based on a book I published 3 years ago. And the presentation is on body language in Indonesian film. In the talk, which I think will last around 50 minutes, I'll be presenting a lot of visual material. Initially, I'll be presenting slides which encapsulate arguments, slides which contain images to which I refer. Secondly, if there is time, I can show some videos which are also relevant to the arguments. And in fact, some of the videos are based on images that I've shown earlier. In fact, the images are taken out of the films themselves. So I'm now going to open a PowerPoint presentation, and I won't be visible on the screen for most of this presentation. You'll hear my voice, And but you will be looking at images that I will be commenting on. So I'm now going to share my screen and begin the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, I'll just begin this. Excuse me, I need to just set this up. And I'll just say that this book is currently available at an incredibly reduced price at only 20% of its original price. The original price is very high. And if people are interested, we can send out an email which gives you links. So here's the book, Cultural Specificity in Indonesian Film, Diversity in Unity. In the title, I turn round the Indonesian national motto from unity in diversity to diversity in unity. And in the image we have here, Garin Nugroho shooting a film in 1995. I think it's only his second or third major feature. Now, I want to move on to another book, which is really important in terms of the history of the sort of work that I'm doing. And this is a book which is an anthropological study of Bali based on 25,000 photos taken with Leica cameras between 1937 and 1940 by the two very famous anthropologists, Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson. Bateson was her husband at the time. So here we have the opening page of this book. It's called Balinese Character, a Photographic Analysis, published in New York by the New York Academy of Sciences in 1942. And the reason why this book is interesting is that it's an early experiment in visual anthropology. And to a certain extent, my book is a kind of experiment in using analyses of films as a way of talking about Indonesian culture. So it also is making use of approaches developed in visual anthropology. But in fact, my own background is as a film lecturer, not as an anthropologist. But I find anthropology a very fascinating field to read about. Now, the book by Bateson and Mead consists of 100 pages of plates. You see a plate on the left, which has in it, in this case, 6 photographs. Now, there are 100 of these pages, and they're complemented on the other side of the open book by commentary. And that commentary explains how the topic they've selected is evidenced by the images that they show. And in this one, which is plate 5, very early in the book, they discuss crowds and the idea of being in a crowded and busy environment. And here they're really introducing the idea that Bali is a group-oriented society rather than an individualistic society. And they show this by showing formations of large crowds of people, where the people obviously enjoy being close to one another and having even some degree of bodily contact, but often forming patterns which express their unity within their culture. So that's just one image or one topic expressed through one page of plates in this book, which has 100 plates. And each plate has six images in it. Now, this is a second book that is actually available online free of charge. It's been posted up, I don't really know who, on a number of sites. And if you go to it, you can simply download it as a PDF. And as I said earlier, we will email out to participants in this webinar links to both my book and how you might be able to buy it if you want to, or if you can afford it, or you have an institution which might want it. But in this case, the case of Balinese character, this is a book that you can actually get free because it's out of print. It's been out of print for many, many years. Now, I'll show you one more plate from this. Now, this is plate 16, which is still only about 15% into the 16% into the whole book. And the topic here is visual and kinesthetic learning. And here you have not 6 images, not 6 photographs, but 8. And they're all showing the teacher, Mario, teaching a young student certain ways of dancing. And in the detailed commentary, which you can read for yourself if you get the book, you can see that what the anthropologists are illustrating from this is that there's a certain logic to the kind of teaching that is going on. And that logic is that the child, in a way's body, the child is in a way encouraged to be passive at the central points of his body, that is his torso. But at the same time, he is being encouraged to cultivate separate kinds of awareness of different parts of his body. So instead of just doing something more or less spontaneously and unconsciously, the child is being encouraged to develop a heightened sensitivity to what each different part of his body is doing. And this is why even today you can see these beautiful Balinese dances where somebody's body might be moving in one direction, but an arm is moving in a different direction, and the fingers of the hand of that arm are doing something different again. So this is a kind of super training of body language in a culture which is a collective or community culture. Now, this therefore is an introduction to the whole concept of how you think about how people inhabit their bodies and how they relate to their bodies, and how this can be spontaneous and in a way developed in the person through the family and through the culture, but can also be trained in different ways. And I think it would be easier to train a Balinese in these specialized kinds of disparate movements than to train, say, an Australian or an American or a Britisher who comes from a society which doesn't really have a community body language. I'll now move on to more contemporary Indonesian films. Now, this is a film I'm going to discuss at some length because, for one thing, it's discussed at some length in my book. This is November 1828. I'm surprised. It's a great Indonesian film, a historical spectacular with a lot of thought gone into it. So it's not just an adventure film. It's a thoughtful portrayal of aspects of Indonesian society and culture. It's the main spectacle film produced, the only one, by Teguh Karya's Teater Populer, and it was made in 1978, completed, I think, in early 79. And here you see a group of Dutch officers or officers of the Dutch army standing on a porch of maybe the village head's house. And they've got a barrier between them and the huge tumult of villagers are trying to engage with them and to hold them in captivity. They don't appear to be aggressing them apart from just holding them there. Now, this is a publicity still from November 1828, but it's reminiscent of quite a number of moments in the film as a whole. Now, I'll just move on. By the way, the officers that you see standing there, the central one that I'm pointing to now, he is played by Slamet Raharjo. And these are Indo officers, which means that they're Indonesians who have been trained in a Dutch army, and some of them are part half Dutch themselves. That is, they may have an Indonesian mother and a Dutch father. And they're called Indos. I'll move on. Now, November 1828 is set during the Java War, which was from 1825 to 1830 and was the first occasion of major resistance to the Dutch. And it occurred in central Java. And perhaps the main leader in the war was Prince Diponegoro of the court of Yogyakarta. Now, while the film is set in the Java War, and they refer to Diponegoro on occasions in the film, Diponegoro himself does not appear in the film because the film throws the emphasis away from the leaders in the war, which most films would probably present as the central characters in the film, to ordinary villagers who are resisting Dutch intrusion into their own villages. But Diponegoro does feature as a figure within my webinar now, as we shall see. Here is a very famous painting done by Raden Saleh, who was a Javanese from Semarang, who at the age of 22 received a scholarship to go and study with painters in Holland, given the talents that he had already displayed as a young man and as an adolescent. And this painting was done in 1856. And it depicts Prince Diponegoro here being arrested by Dutch when he goes to a peace conference in Magelang in 1830. And as you people in Makassar will probably know, after he was arrested, he was a year or so later sent into exile, initially to Manado and then to Makassar, where he was imprisoned for the rest of his life in Fort Rotterdam. Now, I want to discuss the body language in the painting. And I argue in my book and here that there are two kinds of body language in the painting. There's the body language of the Dutch officers here, seen in this part, and the body language of the Indonesians, their leaders and warriors, and the common people, perhaps over here. Now, this is just a picture of Raden Saleh with the title of the Indonesian title of the painting, Diponegoro ditangkap di Magelang. Now, what's interesting about Radden Saleh is that after he arrived in Holland, one of the first paintings he did was of a Dutch winter, a beautiful winter scene, which you can see if you go to Radden Saleh's Wikipedia page, along with most of his major paintings. But for a lot of the 1830s, he specialised in portraits, and he learnt portrait painting from Dutch artists who respected him and thought he was a very talented painter, possibly talented than more talented than the people who were teaching him. So what was happening was that he was being taught to paint in a Dutch style. It's a Dutch style that had evolved over the previous 200 years. And it's a style of portraiture. Now I come back to this painting from, this image from November 1828, because I want to compare it with the painting by Radden Saleh. So we shoot down again. In a way, in this image, what Tagu has done is in this corner of the painting, of the photographic image, to reproduce something of the basic structure of the painting by that rather than the Dutch officers controlling the situation, we have these Indo officers who are representatives of the Dutch being threatened by and caught up by Javanese villagers. So this is like a humorous reproduction of the painting with the roles of the main actors reversed. And I'm sure that Tagu knew he was doing this, or his associates, because one of the interesting things about this painting is that it was initially given to the Dutch king. It was painted in 1856, I think, and then presented to the Dutch king. And in 1978, or 77, 78, it was returned to Indonesia and presented by the Dutch royal family to the Indonesian people. And Tagu and his associates studied this painting when they were making the film November 1828. Tagu told me that personally. Now, what I've been suggesting is that Radden Saleh deliberately incorporated aspects of Dutch style painting into this wonderful picture here, and rather moving picture. And I want to talk about Dutch group portraiture by giving two examples. The first one was done in 1637, and it's a portrait of the regents of the Provenia Huis de Haarlem, which means was a portrait of the, you could say, the committee overseeing an old people's home. And the second is by Rembrandt, and it was done 25 years later, and that's called Syndics of the Drapers Guild. So look at the first one. So these are regents of these are people like the committee overseeing an old people's home. Now this is known as a painting in the genre of Dutch group portraiture. And what sort of group is it? Now I want to suggest that the group is formed administratively. These people don't form a natural, spontaneous group amongst themselves. They're organised, they are a set of individuals who are organised by their public role as administrators to be part of a committee. And they've been the painter has composed the painting in a way that shows each of them as an individual, separate from the other person, but administratively part of a group. And you notice the distance between these figures. It's not like Rame or crowdedness that you see in Bateson and Mead images. Now, in the next image, this is called something like, it means something like overseers of the Drapers Guild. These men, they have a role which they have for 3 to 5 years, which is, as a committee, they must check the quality of the cloth that is being produced in the town. So they're both craftsmen and businessmen who are playing a role, a quality control role. But apart from saying that, I want to point out that each is presented separately as an individual, usually spaced to a degree apart from others, and forming a group administratively, and that administrative group is then in turn composed by the painting as part of the codes or conventions of Dutch group portraiture. It doesn't look like an Indonesian painting, really, does it? Now I'll move on, and I've got one more, which is Dutch group portraiture with a military theme, and this is by Frans Hals, done in 1639, officers, civic guard in 1639. This, by the way, is Frans Hals up here, and this is another artist, painter. And they notice that they put themselves, he himself and the other painting in the background. But here again, although you have a greater number of people and they're standing closer to each other because there's so many of them and they've got to fit into the portrait, they are presented as individuals who are presenting themselves to the portraitist. And insofar as they form a group, it's a group of military people who are organised according to the codes of painting. Now, as I've said, Tagu studied this painting by Raden Saleh, and I think that he incorporated, if you look, that in turn, Raden Saleh had studied the conventions of Dutch group portraiture when he was a student in Holland in his 20s, in the 1830s. Now, we take a close image here, and you can see that insofar as the Dutch are in this painting, they are presented more or less in the way in which military people are presented in Dutch paintings. So this part of the image uses Dutch group portraiture. And here we find a similar composition of the Indos, spaced in a more or less similar way to the paintings we've been looking at, and to a degree similar to the image of the Dutch in Raden Saleh's portrait, except that there are also Indonesians standing on that porch. So Tagu has studied the painting, and the painter studied Dutch group portraiture, and Tagu reproduces Dutch group portraiture in his use of the Indos to suggest that they are individuals who are organised militarily as a group, and particularly as individuals rather than part of a group, closely knit group in the society. And here we have Raden Saleh's image of body language of Javanese. And over here on the right, you have probably the lesser important members of the delegation sitting, squatting, duduk bersila, closely bunched together. And here you have a combination of the senior people, the aristocrats, the priyayi, standing while their attendants also squat. You'll notice that these figures are all standing closer to each other. I'll just move on. Now Tagu, of course, and he's simply creating images drawn from life in a way, also creates a different body language for the Javanese, different from that of the West. They're squatting, yes. They're also, by and large, sitting closer to one another. Now here is a dance. I've just forgotten for the moment the name of the dance, but it is a dance performed by young men in Central Java, which Tagu has put into the film in order to create a sense of the togetherness of the young Indonesian men. And it's not based on anything that's military, and it's not even based simply on religious principles, I think. Later, I will show you this scene as a video, if there is time. I think there probably will be time to do that. But here again, this is a very different kind of body language from what you find in Dutch group portraiture and probably also in Holland. And throughout the film, Tagu maintains this sort of different ways of imaging them. And I don't think that this is simply because he was influenced by Raden Saleh. I think Tagu was very alert to different kinds of body language. And that's why he picked up the different kinds of body language that are in the Raden Saleh painting and emulates that. But he has his own way of dealing with it as well. Now, what I'm arguing is that throughout the Indonesian archipelago, to varying degrees, we have something like a group body language, which is different from Western individualistic body language. And this body language dates back 1200 years to the Hindu-Buddhist era, at least, as seen in the engravings on the 8th century Buddhist stupa at Borobudur. And I'm going to show you an image from Borobudur in a moment or two. This image is part of the narration of a story where the hero, a particular hero, encounters 16 nymphs. And we'll show you the 16 nymphs now. Now here you see these nymphs, the women, sitting very, very close to one another, their bodies actually touching one another, not separated. Their torsos and arms virtually touching each other. It's difficult to see exactly to what degree. But this is certainly a kind of idea of a group body language. Now, we may say, well, that's all very well. We see this in a very old and famous Buddhist stupa, 1200 years old or so. What about today? 12th century later, there is body language in Adapading and Cinta, 2002, in a very early scene. Now, they're actually comforting one of the girls here. So they're being particularly affectionate to one another, but nevertheless, you see their hands are joined in the three cases. In the case of the fifth, four cases, there are hands are joined. The fifth is playing a musical instrument, but also other parts of their bodies touch one another. Now, I haven't seen images like this in, I'm not an expert on American teen movies, though I've seen a few, but I haven't seen images like this in American teen movies. If you have bodily contact, it's usually heterosexual bodily contact of a sexual nature between a man and a woman. But this is not uncommon body language to see in Jakarta or even in Bali. And as I understand, when the scene was shot, as with a lot of scenes in Adapting and Cinta, the young women playing the roles were asked not only to improvise their dialogue, but to find their ways of being together physically. So this is not something that's necessarily produced by a director, although it's certainly done with the agreement and cooperation of a director and probably with some broad general instructions. It's also something arrived at by the young women performing in the film. So we see some degree of similarity between Borobudur and 20th century Indonesia, 21st century Indonesia, in a body language that is not found in quite the same way in Europe or in the USA or in Australia. Now, you don't always find this kind of body language in an Indonesian film. It depends on the scene, but it also depends on the extent to which a particular director wishes to incorporate what he sees as specific ways of using the body in his own society and culture. And the best directors do this. Teguh has done it in November 1828 in other films. Rudi Sujarwo has done it in Adapting and Cinta. And we'll look at some more images now as well. So of interest also is Puisi Tak Terkuburkan, Poetry is Not Buried. The date here is wrong. This film is actually not 2002, it's actually 1999. I'll move on. This film is set in Aceh in October 1965. And here we have prisoners performing didong while they await to be executed. So they're people who are regarded as communists. And again, you have people sitting, squatting, bodies very much close to one another. You have a central performer who's relating to them, and they're relating back to him reciprocally. Now here you could say that the body language in the culture or has been ritualized by the culture into a performance. So you have the group, but then they find ways of expressing group interaction within performance. So this is ritualized body language. Here's another example of ritualized body language, and obviously this is taken from Bali, and it's more formal. But the closeness between the participants is there with the bodies all grouped alongside each other. Legs probably touching. So this is the ritualization of the idea of the group. And this is from a film by Sardono W. Wakasumo, who is, as most of you would know, a famous Indonesian dancer, choreographer, performance artist, and occasional filmmaker whose films are all avant-garde works. And this is a film called Dongeng Dari Dira, The Sorceress of Dira. But once again, I'm exemplifying group body language, but in this case, ritualized body language. So Dongeng Dari Dira, body language ritualized in performance. Now there's an earlier film that Sardono made in 1979, where you have an even more elemental body language. This shows that Sardono is interested in the language of bodies. He's not so interested in narratives, though his films don't lack story to a degree. He's interested in looking at the forms the human body can take in a group context. And I'll show you two images from meta-ecology. The film Meta-ecology was actually directed by Gotthold Prokosa, who's an independent avant-garde filmmaker, now deceased, unfortunately, a very good friend of mine. And, but the performance event was designed by Sardono, and he in fact participates in it himself. So this is very elemental. This is the idea of the group existing in mud and arising out of mud. It's almost like the origins of humankind over hundreds of thousands of years imagined. This film lasts about 16 or 17 minutes, and most of the time these guys are in this huge pool of mud. This film was actually made on the grounds of the Jakarta Institute of the Arts, which is, by the way, that land was originally owned by Raden Saleh, and it was where his Jakarta home was built. And in the background, you have children from the surrounding village, suburb of Jakarta, many of them living along the Ciliwung River in slum areas. And some of these would probably bathe in the river themselves, these children. And here they're being asked to watch as spectacle, something which they themselves partly know. And here's another image. So you can see this deep interest that Sardono has in the idea of the group in Indonesia and the different forms it can take, whether it's ritualized or amorphous, spontaneous, and hardly even controlled. Now I'm going to come to a really very good example of body language, and that's the use of body language in what was made broadly as a popular film in 1982, directed by Ami Priyono and based on the legendary story and also partly on the novel by Romo Mangunwijaya. Now I'm going to show stills from two scenes from this film, and then I'm going to show you one of the scenes as a video. So this is the next images. The next four images are early scenes in the film Rora Mendut, introducing the Mataram court. Now here there's a dance going on in the Mataram court, where the young female dancer has done an exotic dance of her own design rather than doing a hieratic, very elaborate court dance, slow and static, even if beautiful. She does a lively dance. And the courtiers join in, and it's as though she is resisting the court protocols. But rather than concentrating on that issue, I want to show you the way the spectators are filmed by Ami Priyono. Now here you have aristocratic young and middle-aged women from the court sitting together, dressed fairly identically with different designs on their clothes, but the same jewelry. And sitting in a kind of group formation as though that is part of their culture, with their arms in contact. This is an excellent example of carefully considered Indonesian body language in an Indonesian feature film. Here we find men imitating the dance while they're sitting down, and the men are sitting more or less as a group, not as close to each other as the women, but on the other hand, they're actually moving, so they can't be in bodily contact with one another. And then you have in the background other groups as well, all very close to each other, standing there, with their clothing expressing the idea that they are part of a society, a social, overall social design. They're not just wearing individualistic clothes, which they, as individuals, think suits them. And then finally, here we have a close-up of the women in the background of the previous image. Again, organized in a way very similar to the image earlier of the younger aristocratic women. Now, as I gradually myself became much more aware of Indonesian body language, because I wasn't really aware of it until I came to Indonesia and started to look at Indonesian films, I began to see these things for myself. And about 25 years ago, I was at a conference. I knew Ami and had, on a number of occasions, some very good conversations with him, though I didn't meet him all that often because he was busy and I was only in Jakarta on occasions. But we had excellent conversations, and I told him what I thought of these images. I referred to this scene and I said to him about it roughly what I'm saying to you now. And Ami turned to me and he said, "David, this is wonderful to hear you say that. You are the first person," he said, "in the 15 or so years since I made that film, that has ever made that comment on this scene. And you're right. You have described exactly what I set out to show. Thank you very much." Right. So here we are. Some Indonesian directors are very conscious of how they group people in their films, and they see themselves as doing something from what they would do if they were making a film about New Yorkers in New York, or English people in the suburbs of London, or even in the English countryside. Now, I'm going to show one more example through stills, and these are reverse angle shots. If you've seen the film Rora Mendut or know the story, the young man, Pronocitro, who's a kind of warrior, he sees the young woman, Rora Mendut, who has become a virtual prisoner in the court because I think the Sultan wishes her to become his courtesan and she resists that. And one day when she's on a walk a little outside the court grounds with her maidservant, Portraiture, who was accompanied by his fellow servants, warriors, sees her for the first time, and later they fall in love and elope. Now, this is what's called a reverse angle construction, an angle, reverse angle construction. Now, here we have Portraiture on the left, accompanied by his servants, looking to the right because he's seen, or he thinks he's seen, a young woman who is very attractive. Then we have a shot of Rora Mendut, and Rora Mendut is here, and she's standing behind her servant. In fact, what we haven't realised is that Portraiture and his comrades have been looking in the wrong direction, and they turn and look, instead of looking to the right, they look to the left. And it's then that they see her properly. And then we have, so this is an angle, reverse angle. This is one angle, and this is what Portraiture sees. And this is what Rora Mendut would see if she was standing closer. This is the angle from which she would see him. So that's an angle, reverse angle construction, very common in film. And then we have a return to the earlier shot, the reverse angle, and you have a medium close-up of two women. So I've explained the reverse angle construction and how the body is positioned in each of the four images. There's another level I want to comment on in these four images. In this first image, Portraiture is in bodily contact with one of his servants. He has his left hand on the servant's right shoulder. And I think if one looked at the whole scene, the servant in the middle would be in bodily contact with the other servant on the right. In other words, this is a touch culture in which touching is normal and is not always sexualized, but expresses group identity and community. Same thing in this image. Rora Mendut is very close to her servant. In fact, she's holding her servant at the waist here. Once again, here we have the hands, we have two hands on the shoulder here, and then this hand on the shoulder here. Now, this also is what Ami was trying to do, not just to do a particular set of angle, reverse angle constructions, or even just having three or two people in a shot rather than one, because in Hollywood, when the hero sees the heroine, by and large, you wouldn't have two angle, reverse angle constructions between groups of people. The close-up would be very important, and the close-up would never, the final clinching close-up would not have two people. It would be close-ups, two close-ups, each with one person in it. So this was something that Ami deliberately told his actors he wanted in the film. Now I'm going to show a video of this scene. It lasts about 3 minutes. Let's hope it plays without any problems.
Jumpa na! Kita harus pulang ya. Kami harus pulang. Jumpa na! Hari hampir petang. Cepat! Jumpa na! Minggir, ayo minggir. Mas minggir, Mas. Yuk minggir yuk. Ayo minggir, ikut Dari dan Roro.
So I hope I've now moved out of the PowerPoint presentation with its videos because I understand that at this point, which is nearly an hour into the presentation, that there may be some questions. But secondly, I want to say that I have 3 more excerpts from films that I can show. One of them is from November 1828, where you see the young men dancing. Another one is from a film that I haven't discussed at all yet, and that's Rembulan Matahari, Moon and Sun, by Slamet Rahadra, made in 1979, where I have a rather different point to make. And then if there was time, there's a very humorous scene from a film by Shuman Jaya called Pinanga the Proposal, in which we see Batawi interacting at a social event. And here we come back to the initial point of Rame, and also highly reciprocal interaction in conversation, which is a characteristic of body and verbal language of the Batawi. Okay, so Rahmat, do you want to move in now and oversee any kinds of question and answers? Please go ahead.
Yeah. thank you for the lecture, for the presentation. Please, participant, if you have a question, you can write it on the live chat on YouTube.
If I can make a point, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
There was one point I meant to make earlier about the video of Rora Mendut and possibly some of the other videos I will show. Indonesian films since 1969, most of them, 99.9% of them have been shot in CinemaScope or widescreen of some kind. The video I showed was simply in a 3:4 format. And that was because the video is taken from an Australian television screening of the film, where, and that particular television station sometimes uses the widescreen and sometimes it simply uses the 3:4 frame. But that's why you have that difference. Okay, is there a problem? Did you hear me there, Rahman? I'm not getting sound at the moment.
We can hear. We can hear.
I can now hear, yes.
Yeah. Please continue, Pak David.
What's that?
Please continue. It's okay.
You'd like? Well, I haven't received any questions. That's all right. I've been presenting some quite complex. Do now is to go on and to illustrate some more points using video rather than still images. Okay. So I'll now share my screen again. Now, the excerpt I'm going to show now is from the film November 1828. And we will now play this scene from November 1828.
Orang serakah. Bangun! Bangun! Orang itu memfitnah kami. Suami saya cuma bela penduduk yang tidak bisa bayar pajak lagi. Berdiri! Ayo! Dengan beras. Ular beludak. Arman! Sini kamu. Apa kamu tahu apa itu ular beludak? Saya tahu. Ya, sejenis ular yang tampangnya jelek, pendek, gemuk, malas, makanya paling banyak dan sangat berbisa. Menurut ibu ini itu adalah kamu, Pak Demang. Bawa gerobak mesiu ke tempat yang teduh. Berdiri. Surem, kingken. layon tengah ilang manise watan niro kang landung dirikan kubu pertahanan di sekeliling rumah ini. Jadikan benteng sementara. Dan minta tolong Bapak Demang itu agar menyerahkan penduduk. Angkat, tarik, ayo tarik, ayo. Tak gunung kapin jebol.
Okay. I'll stop the screen share. Now, I think most of the points that I could make about what you've just seen, I have already made at the time that I was showing the slides. But I can reiterate a number of points here and also just explain the context a little further in the scene from Tagu's November 1828. The first third or so of the segment shows the tension between the ordinary villagers and the village head, who is in league with the Indo officers of the Dutch army. Now, this is actually historically accurate in that, to some extent, people got appointed as village heads. Not all, due to their willingness to cooperate with the colonial regime. So this point is being made in the film. by the women when they refer to the village head as an ular beludak. So you have that sort of scene of minor conflict and accusation on the part of women against their village head in front of the Indo officers. And then there's a transition. Now the transition takes a while because the camera moves away from that space and it follows the actress Yani Rahman as she moves slowly to a different part of the village. So the idea that there's a transition going on here is very marked by the director. He doesn't just cut to the scene of the men dancing. And he doesn't just cut to an image of Yani Rahman arriving at the scene of the dancing and looking. He follows her, and it creates a sense in the film for the audience that you're moving from one kind of space to another, from one kind of social ethos to a very different kind of social ethos. So that's very cleverly done in the film and shows what a master Tagu was and how conscious he was trying to put the audience into different positions in relationship to the various levels of the social world, the complex social world he was depicting. And then you have the dance. Now, as I've said earlier, this I think I've forgotten, sorry, I didn't check this before, but I have written about this in my book. This is a dance which was, I think, Islamic in origin to a degree, but in any case, it's being performed in an Islamic workshop under the gaze, the relaxed gaze of the Pesantren head and watched by young children, including the young girls who are dressed in headscarves. And the thing about the dance is that the way it's presented in the film, it's not sort of just, it's not a performance. It seems to be a kind of form of activity which the young men enjoy and which expresses something of their relationship to each other and can be watched when they decide to perform it. So this is not, so the dance is not theatre performed for an audience, it's a form of interaction which can be watched by other villagers just as it's watched by Penonton viewers watching the film and by the actress who's gone to seek out a young man with whom she seems to have a developing relationship. Another point about this scene, which is not really so much about body language, but about spatial construction. It's very commonly said that the dominant form of angle, reverse angle in film is where men look at women and either they investigate women or they're attracted by them or they're attracted by them and they investigate them at the same time. Now, that's an important construction which in some films is very prevalent. Has been very prevalent in Hollywood cinema, but it's not the only construction of gender in Hollywood cinema. And here we have a reversal of it. You're looking at the young men from the point of view of the woman who was attracted by the dance and who was waiting for an encounter with her boyfriend. So here we have a slightly different construction, not specific to of the angle, reverse angle shot, not specific to Indonesia. It's not necessarily a purely Indonesian construction. It's not culturally specific. But you know, the director could have chosen to show the dance objectively from shots which were not positioned where the woman is. So that's a conscious choice on his part. But certainly in the dance itself, we see body language of a group, and it's a ritualization of group relationship done within a pesantren, where the young men are obviously committed to Islamic values, and these are in turn related to the idea of group identity, as Tagu has seen this in the film. That's all I want to say about this particular scene, but I would like also to show another excerpt, and unless somebody wants to interrupt me now, Rahmat, I'll go straight on and show a scene.
We have one question.
Okay, well, we'll go to the question. I will stop screen sharing.
The question is, for the younger generation like me, to understand body language, where can we start?
Where do we start?
Yeah.
Dari mana kami mulai?
Yes.
Maaf, saya tidak bicara bahasa Indonesia tadi karena konsep-konsep yang saya mengutarakan sangat kompleks dan agak sulit untuk saya untuk mondar-mandir antara bahasa Indonesia dan bahasa Inggris, kecuali ada naskah. Tidak ada naskah. Well, dalam presentasi ini saya mulai dengan aspek buku oleh Margaret Mead dan Gregory Bates yang menganalisa budaya Bali melalui gambar, melalui 25,000 foto yang diambil dengan Leica kamera. Dan naskah mereka terdiri dari gambar-gambar dengan komentar yang menganalisa dan memperkenalkan konsep-konsep yang menurut dua-duanya antropolog sangat berarti dalam konteks ini. Bagi saya, how did it all begin for me? I don't know. Kalau Anda mulai dengan academic reset akademik, harus baca banyak. Dan saya menyadari kalau saya mau mengerti cultural specificity in Indonesian film, saya memerlukan membaca buku-buku oleh antropolog. Dan saya antara lain membaca Balinese Character, a photographic analysis. Buku yang saya sangat suka membaca. Walaupun mungkin saya tidak merasa semua argumentasi dibukti dengan lengkap, ini punya banyak anjuran yang sangat bisa memperlihatkan opsi-opsi untuk mengerti apa yang memberikan kepada saya sebuah video Betacam, Betamax dari filmnya November 1828. Dan saya sudah nonton film itu di Cinematheque sebagai print 35 mili dengan mesin editing. Tapi hanya kali saya nonton, atau 2 kali saya nonton. Dengan Betamax, saya bisa mempertimbangkan melalui mengulangi nonton. Dan saya baru menyadari ada link antara lukisan oleh Raden Saleh yang saya sudah lihat juga. Saya baca apa yang saya bisa dapat tentang Perang di Ponorogo, dan ini termasuk naskah oleh Diponegoro yang di mana disertai gambar juga lukisan. So, sebagaimana saya bisa ingat, itulah bagaimana saya mulai. Tetapi mungkin sebelum itu saya punya sensitivity terhadap body language. But juga saya sudah lama punya sensitivity kepada nonton film. So, you know, if you're very interested in film, you must be interested in visuality and you need to think about it. But, you know, ketika saya mulai dengan ikut topic, there was a topic in film studies, very important in the 1970s, that cultural specificity in Japanese cinema. And there were a number of articles and books written about this. One by an important article on the difference formal stratagems yang dipakai oleh Ozu Yasujiro, salah satu sutradara Jepang paling terkenal. Dan juga ada buku oleh Noel Birch tentang form and content, form in Japanese cinema and perbedaan dalam struktur dan form dalam film Jepang, terutama dalam film Ozu dan Kurosawa. So, pada tahun 80, saya menyadari ada pertanyaan, apa ini cultural difference? Apakah cultural difference bisa dilihat dalam banyak film, dalam banyak negara, atau hanya di Jepang? Oleh karena itu, saya memutuskan untuk mengeksplorasi dengan mulai, pada saat itu saya belum bicara bahasa Indonesia, belum datang ke Indonesia, mungkin ada topik cultural specificity in Indonesian cinema, not in Japanese cinema. Dan sesudah itu, sesudah 2-3 tahun, saya menyadari salah satu forma untuk cultural specificity adalah body language. So that is the history of how I became involved in this. Okay, cukup? Mudah-mudahan orang lain bisa belajar dari pengalaman saya. So will I go on now and show a scene from Slamet Raharjo's film, or is there another question?
Silakan dilanjutkan, Pak.
Okay. Okay, tunggu sebentar. Now, the scene I'm going to show is a scene from Moon and Sun. And this also is a ritual scene. Here, the scene is very dark. I'll try and bring up the screen brightness. And dalam adegan ini, tokoh utama, orang muda, dia mau dapat keberanian untuk mulai menangani masalah-masalah yang ada di dalam desa-desa dia. Dia sudah di luar desa untuk mungkin 8 tahun. Dia coba tinggal di Jakarta, di daerah Tanah Abang. Dan kehidupan di sana kurang bagus. Oleh karena itu, dia kembali ke desa. Tapi di desa dia menemukan ada banyak problem di desa itu. Misalnya, transportasi dalam desa itu dikontrol oleh preman orang yang mau bawa apa yang mereka memproduksikan seperti sayur untuk dijual di desa dekat, mereka harus bayar terlalu banyak dan seterusnya. So dia berharap dia bisa mulai menangani problem di desa. Dia didorong oleh orang muda juga di desa itu, dan mereka mulai dengan ritual performance pada tengah malam. And aneh, tapi ibunya juga, perempuan mungkin umurnya 60 tahun kira-kira, 65. Dia juga di sana dan dia juga berpartisipasi dalam performance itu. Okay, saya mulai dengan ini.
Lumaksa ing wengi teka hayu luputa ing lara luputa pilai kabeh. Sampaikan pada rembulan, sampaikan pada matahari. Aku datang. Kamu rembulan, kamu matahari.
We can't see the video.
Aku datang.
Pak David?
Yeah.
We can't see the video.
Yes, want the sound up?
We can't see the video. Yeah.
Cannot see it.
Yeah. Share screen first.
Saya sudah mencoba untuk share screen.
Yes, all right. Perfect.
Lumaksa ing wengi teka hayu luputa ing lara luputa pilai kabeh. Sampaikan pada rembulan, sampaikan pada matahari. Aku datang. Kamu rembulan, kamu matahari. Aku datang. Miwah pagawe Allah gunane wong lupuh. Bumi ateman tirta maling atusan kena raing mami. Sampaikan pada rembulan, sampaikan pada matahari. Aku datang. Kamu rembulan, kamu matahari. Aku datang. Guru ira kaki yanta sira naru utama kurasan lahir batine aja sira kasusu kudu eleng Enggak. Melanggar pantangan perguruan. Kamu nodai desa ini. Enggak. Akan lebih baik buat kamu. Akan lebih baik buat desa ini. Saya mesti bagaimana? Kudu terima murid kang wingi-wingi, murid kang ora trima. Yuk, aku minta relanya. Anak kidung, anak lagi. Aku pinjam sebentar. Jangan Yurip, relakan saja Mbak. Kudu tapi lai kabeh.
Okay. I will just say a couple of things about that scene. the character whose half of whose moustache is cut off at the end of the scene is the guy who has been controlling transport. And what they do is, rather than perpetrating kekerasan penuh, full violence upon him, they ritually humiliate him. The main point I want to make about this scene really occurs at the very beginning. And that is a kind of contrast between the mother singing what sounds like a lullaby, but contains all kinds of moral maxims, and the behavior of her son with his rhetoric. And the main point I want to make here is that the mother seems to represent, if you talk about gender difference, it's not so much a difference between men and women, but the difference between the maternal and the masculine, which is contrasted very strongly in this scene. Now, I'm not trying to draw any conclusions from this, except to say that there are two dimensions in the scene, and that the role of the mother is obviously very important, and she's deliberately placed there to create some idea that there is something original, that this is an archetypal moment. But then the son then develops all this rhetoric to do with how he's going to control the village and drawing the other men into it. So here we have a different kind of body language. You have a very clear contrast between two dimensions of human experience, where the woman's experience, whether she wants it or not, if she has children and she nurses them and breastfeeds them, is going to be one of nurturing and bringing into being and allowing being to grow. Whereas the male here represents conflict. So that's all I have to say about that scene, and maybe that should draw my presentation to a close unless there is a question.
All right. Thank you so much, Pak David. Wait. I will see the live chat commenter. The question. Yeah, we don't have a question because the time is also up right now.
That's
so
right.
Maybe I let Pak David give 5 minutes for conclusion for this lecture.
Okay, I don't know that I want to speak for another 5 minutes because I've already been involved in this presentation for 65 minutes, 95 minutes. But I just would say a number of other things. In terms of my work overall, buku pertama saya itu tentang issue of cultural difference in Indonesian cinema. Apa itu? Deep structures, terutama dari aspek-aspek traditional societies in Indonesia yang dimasukkan ke dalam film oleh sutradara, biasanya oleh sutradara terbaik yang sangat menyadari banyak dimensi dalam negara ini. Dan saya sudah dalam presentasi ini 90 minit lebih sudah menjelaskan aspek body language yang kelihatan dengan khusus digambarkan oleh sutradara seperti Ami Priyono, Teguh Karya, dan juga oleh Priona dan seterusnya. Dalam buku saya juga ada bab tentang the representation of women, which I have not tried, I have only talked about sedikit. Saya sudah menulis buku kedua yang akan diterbitkan tahun depan, mudah-mudahan akan di-launch akhir tahun depan. But saya diundang untuk menyerahkan naskah saya ke Palgrave. Judul buku kedua saya ini adalah Moments in Indonesian Film History, Film and Popular Culture in a Developing Society. Dalam buku ini, saya tidak menganalisa sebagai prioritas cultural difference or cultural specificity. Saya mau merampung a kind of overview of banyak dimensi dalam Indonesian society. Dari tahun 50 sampai tahun 20 terakhir. Karena Indonesia sekarang ini bukan hanya a traditional society, it's also a modern society dengan banyak dimensi, jauh lebih banyak yang ada dulu. So dalam buku kedua ini saya membahas early films of Usman Ismail tentang zaman perjuangan yang walaupun sangat dipuji di Indonesia dan dianggap sebagai permulaan film nasional di Indonesia, sebetulnya belum pernah dianalisa, dibahas dengan cukup detail. Saya juga membahas political allegory dalam film Indonesia, dalam 4 zaman. Bagaimana sutradara film Indonesia yang berani, cukup berani untuk membuat komentar tentang korupsi atau keganasan dalam zaman mereka melalui alegori. Ini bab kedua. Dalam bab ketiga saya membahas aspek-aspek dan variasi Islam dalam film Indonesia pada antara tahun 70-an dan 90-an, abad ke-20. Dalam bab 4 saya membahas songs and films of Benjamin S. in the 1970s, a popular culture of the poor. Ini fenomenon Benjamin S. juga hanya dianalisa dengan detail oleh saya, dan ini adalah aspek budaya Indonesia Betawi yang luar biasa digambarkan dalam film dan lagu dia. Dalam bab kelima saya membahas third world dimensions of Indonesian society in Indonesian cinema. Indonesia sekarang ini bukan third world country. Itu sekarang developing society. Tapi ada aspek-aspek Indonesia yang masih di belakang, yang pengalaman orang adalah pengalaman orang dunia ketiga. Dan selamat dia menggambarkan ini dalam film yang kami baru nonton sebagian, Rembulan dan Matahari ini, tapi juga Teguh Karya menggambarkan ini dalam film secangkir kopi pahit, Bitter Coffee, film luar biasa tentang situasi tinggal sebagai imigran ke Jakarta. Dan bab terakhir buku ini membahas inovasi dalam film Indonesia dalam 40 tahun terakhir sesudah Soeharto turun. So body language itu bukan satu-satunya isu yang penting di film Indonesia. Itu hanya satu. Tapi it is a good place to start. Karena ini dengan dramatis bisa mewakili apa yang beda di Indonesia yang fundamental. Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I just remind you, I think Rahmat will send out some emails in the next few days with the web addresses for where you can get the Bateson and Mead book. And if you've got any money or your instansi punya wang, mungkin bisa dibeli sebagai hard copy. Thank you very much. Okay.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Pak David. Nanti teman-teman boleh menantikan buku terakhir dari Pak David yang akan rilis di tahun depan. Judulnya Moments in Indonesian Film History 1950 until 2020, Film and Popular Culture in a Developing Society. Terima kasih banyak Pak David atas waktunya. Hai. Hai, terima kasih banyak. Saya mewakili Rumata dan SEAscreen Academy ingin mengucapkan terima kasih banyak dan bagi teman-teman yang sudah menonton di YouTube juga terima kasih banyak. Sekali lagi terima kasih. Sampai jumpa di kemudian hari, Pak.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Maya.
Tutup sekarang.